Hi, buddy.
Sup, Palio?
It's been quite the whirlwind this past weekend for the both of
Yeah,
us.
yeah. It was a wild weekend to put it mildly.
Yeah, this is the Monday after Thanksgiving. This is your Cyber Monday, if you will.
Yes.
Yeah, we just spent about the past 15 minutes pre-show talking about it. We're gonna spare you guys the details because it's kind of
Yeah,
personal to the both of us. We don't feel like sharing.
yeah. But it
But
was a wild weekend.
it's been a doozy, and
It's been a doozy.
we're here. We made time on a Monday, and I can tell you the typical recording time is Friday nights and Saturdays. So we're about 6 days ahead of schedule.
I know. We're don't expect too much of us. It's
Yeah,
because I'm going away again this weekend.
yeah. Alex being a stinker and leaving me again,
It's
and
it's, hun- it's hunting season.
I'm also busy this weekend. So
Yes, you
now's as
are
good a time
actually.
as any to give you guys what you want.
Absolutely.
Totally disregard the fact that at the time of recording I haven't uploaded the last episode, but it's okay.
Oh my
It'll
goodness.
it'll come out. Today we're talking about cool things, really, really cool things, and I absolutely hammered away these notes while Alex
Yes,
was
sir. You did.
busy.
Finishing up work. Yeah.
Today we're
Let's
talking
go.
about sturgeons and paddlefish, and
We're getting
creatures.
more into the vertebrates. We're getting into some of the more interesting vertebrates.
Yeah, I learned some
Sharks are
things
pretty
today.
cool, though.
Sharks are very cool. Chimeras not so much. They're just not as cool. But as always, I am Tyler, your host, and
And
this
I
is
am
this is
Alex.
Alex, my co-host, his host, whatever you want to call him.
Yes,
And we will
one of
start
the hosts.
one of the hosts. We will start as we always do with our nature in the news. Alex, you found this one, so I will let you
Yes, I
start
did.
us off for the day.
Yeah, so today's Nature in the News comes from Science Daily. It is out of Newcastle University. And it is titled Coral Adaptation Unlikely to Keep Pace with Global Warming. So you've heard us talk a little bit about coral bleaching, how climate change is affecting the corals especially. I know we talked a lot about that when we covered the coral. So in this study from Newcastle University, they are saying that because of the increase in ocean temperature, the tolerance that the coral naturally have, and then the kind of forced adaptation through natural selection towards the more tolerant coral is the heating is outpacing the ability for the coral to evolve and to become more tolerant to that heat. It's causing much bigger chloral bleaching events, and the frequency and intensity of these events is supposed to increase as climate change also increases.
Now, technically, we can stop this process
Yes, we
by
can.
reducing our emissions.
Yes.
So less CO2 in the air means that it warms slower, which means the coral has more time to adapt and evolve to keep up with this climate change.
Yeah, as well as everything else that's affected. But from the co-author of the study, Professor Peter Mumby from the University of Queensland, he was saying the Earth is expected to warm by 3 to 5 degrees. I'm thinking that's Celsius by
Correct.
by the end of this century, which is incredibly fast when you think of like the warming of the planet in geologic time. That is ridiculously fast. And that's even with like some reductions in emissions to like that middle of the road scenario, like not quite the world is ending kind of like the high end scenario, and of course the low end scenario would be getting rid of emissions to the point that we kind of, I don't know if I want to say reverse, but slow it down significantly. Kind of that middle of the
Negate
road is
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 probably
the
a better word there.
maybe is that 3 degrees of warming, which is just too fast for the coral populations to survive, unfortunately.
Yeah, it's a very conservative number, but it's still not a good number.
And I mean, it's something that says some of the models that they were using suggest that some genetic adaptation could offset the projected coral loss and functionality, but that's only if like a rapid climate action is achieved. So let's hope that they're able to do something to help with that. They said they may try to help do some interventions with like an assisted evolution through selective breeding sort of thing. But coral are notoriously difficult to breed in captivity. So we don't really know. Hopefully the coral are able to keep it, because if loss of the coral reefs is like a environmental like doomsday sort of thing, for at
Yeah.
least as far as the ocean is concerned.
Yeah, it'd be the equivalent of losing like every major rainforest
Just about.
in terms of like biodiversity and stuff like that.
Yes, which is real bad.
Right. Do you have anything else to add?
Unfortunately, I do not. At least that was kind of the short overview of this article. As I said, it is on Science Daily, published on November 28th, 2024. So if you folks would like to read into it a little more on your own, feel free. Please do. We would love, it's always a good thing to read into it some more. Kind of, as we say, learn
Agreed.
some more on your own, not just from us.
Once again, that was by Newcastle University.
Correct. Which I think is in Australia, based off of some of the co-authors being from Australia as well.
Correct. So without further ado, we'll go ahead. We'll jump into our lesson for the day. So we're jumping from Chondrichthyes into Actinopterygii, which is the big fancy word for ray-finned fish.
Yes.
So
this is when you think of fish, this is usually what you think of. This is the vast majority of all of the fish.
Yeah. So we'll go over a little bit about Actinopterygii in general, and then we'll get into our two groups today. They're the more primitive groups out of this. So there's the amount of fish that fit into this group is 50% of all living vertebrates.
Yes, it is a ridiculous number of organisms.
Pretty much, if it's a fish, it's in this group.
Just
minus
about.
like the sharks, rays, and chimera that we talked about, and like two other groups we'll talk about at the very end of fish. So they're called ray-finned fish due to the webbings of there's all kinds of shapes and sizes. Alex has done the favor of putting it up on screen, a quick image for us. They have these webbings of skin. So like, look at your hand as a human being, and you kind of have webbing between your fingers at the very bases.
I have a little more on my fingers.
So imagine that webbing goes the whole way out to your fingertip. That's what makes it a ray-finned fish.
And in between that webbing, there's like spines or rays, similar to like how your finger bones are. Same kind of functionality as far as how the fin works. So think of those rays or bones or spines that support that webbing.
Yeah, and those spines have the fancy name Lepidotrichia is the fancy word, the technical term for those spines.
Okay.
So the advantage to having these rays as your fins versus a fleshy lobe is you can kind of maneuver it a little bit better, and in terms of hydrodynamics and fluid dynamics and stuff like that, it allows for stronger thrust to weight ratios because you're able to adapt how much of a face you have pushing against the water. If that
so you
makes
can
sense.
see in a number of the fish in the images, a lot of them you can see especially their pectoral fins actually kind of tuck up to the side of the body, making them a bit more streamlined. And also with that helps them push a little because they have a little more support to the size of the fin versus how much they can do with it.
And those rays, those Lepidotrichia, those rays attach directly to the skeleton, whether it's at the base of the skeleton or a more extensive bit of it. They have a swim bladder, which is something we haven't really talked about before. The sharks don't have it. Their flotation really comes from the oily liver, correct?
Yes, I believe so. The liver in the Chondrichthyes is has a lot of oil in it, and it's fairly large compared to the other internal organs, which is kind of how they are able to float. Because if you think oil is less dense than water, so it floats. That's how they maintain that buoyancy.
Yeah, and a swim bladder is kind of a sac in in like the internals of a fish, and it kind of just like it just fills with air, doesn't
Pretty
it?
much, yeah.
That's how they move up and down the water column, is by adjusting the amount of air in their swim bladder.
Yeah.
Some more primitive species, like the ones we'll talk about today, the beachers actually have
Oh,
and breathe air. It's weird. It's weird because
yeah. If there are more
shouldn't.
primitive species, yeah. Strange
And
indeed.
oh, my bad. I apologize. Yes, the beachers have lungs. I misread my line of notes. They use their swim bladders to breathe. But yeah, beachers also have lungs. And other species have lost their swim bladder entirely. I don't know which ones precisely. I'd assume more like flatfish
Maybe
and things like
like
that
bottom dwelling fish, yeah.
that don't exactly have to float up the water column as frequently. In most species, you have separate urinary and reproductive tracts. The more primitive species, like the sturgeons, have a urogenital system, so they're connected entirely, and some still have a partially connected. I don't quite know how that works. The ducks kind of like connect at some point.
Probably like right near the end.
Yeah,
So in a good number of species, you have like a separate genital opening and like urinary, like waste opening, whereas others it's like that cloaca where they are connected and there's just one opening.
right. Nearly every single ray fin fish is dioecious. They have two separate sexes and go through external fertilization because it's really easy in the water for external fertilization.
Yeah.
The female kind of comes along, does a little, dumps her eggs, and then along comes the male, and he just kind of dumps his sperm, and it just kind of floats around and hits the eggs eventually. Powers of water.
Yeah. Some species, especially like your river dwelling freshwater species, they're a little more technical with it. They'll kind of like use their tail to kind of move some stuff out of the way to make a depression at the bottom, and then put the eggs in there, kind of keep it in one spot, makes it a little more effective rather than just free floating.
A couple species are sequential hermaphrodites. So we've talked about hermaphrodites before. That means that they're both they have both parts.
Yeah.
Sequential hermaphrodites are like to me the biggest example is like clownfish, where
Yes.
you start as all clownfish start as female.
Male.
Female.
No, all clownfish start as male, and then the largest one becomes female.
Is that how that works?
Yes.
Okay. I was on the right track.
Yes, you were on the right track. Yeah, I've seen that a number of times. It's kind of stuck in my head because
It's like Finding Nemo.
yeah, I was about to say I won't ruin it for everyone as far as
Yeah.
how Finding Nemo actually should have worked.
We are
But we'll spare you. We'll allow you to look it up on your own, or kind
correct.
of think of that on your own.
Yes. So whenever the females turn into males, that's called a protogeny, and protandry is whenever you go from male to female. Just technical terms for the scientists in the crowd. And only about 20% of ray fin species use like parental care, whether that's keeping watch of the eggs, like what catfish or bass do that, right?
Yeah,
Where they'll lay the eggs and then there's typically the male that watches over them, sometimes the female, depending on the species,
it really depends.
or both.
Yeah, some though actually, it's almost like actual parental care. Like both sexes will take care of them.
And some watch over their juveniles, their fry. There's a marine species, I can't remember the exact name off the top of my head, where they actually like kind of like store the young in their mouth. It's also in Finding
Yes.
Nemo.
Yes. I know what one you're talking about. I can't remember what it is off the top of my head, though. Kind
I
of have a
want
separate pouch at the bottom of the mouth.
I want to say surgeon fish, but that also doesn't sound right
I'm not
in
sure.
my head. I'll do some research in the background. Alex, if you want to talk about cladistia
I can
for a
do
little
that.
bit while I do some research.
Absolutely. So, Cladistia, they are the first subclass of the rayfin fish that we were talking about. The only living members of that group is the birchers of tropical Africa. A lot of their common traits include having a heterocircle tail and independently rayed dorsal fins. Their earliest diverging branch, they are the earliest diverging branch of the rayfin fish, diverging from the other ray-finned fishes by the Carboniferous period, but they really only have fossils. Then the fossils for the only remaining family date back to the mid-Cretaceous. So, been around for a while. At least the living ones probably longer than some of the more modern rayfin fish. Live in freshwater habitats in tropical Africa and the Nile River system, preferring like floodplains and estuaries, probably warmer. I think that seems like warmer, slower moving waters where there's going to be a lot of food. They are relatively elongated with dorsal finlets ranging from 7 to 18 rather than having one individual dorsal fin. I will stop sharing if Tyler wants to pull up a picture of them while he's working on it. I apologize.
So I was looking at mouth brooding still.
Okay.
Mostly cichlids, by the way, for those of you who are still
Okay,
curious.
mostly cichlids. Okay, yeah. So they're not very large fish. Possess thick ganoid scales, which are more like plate-like than the typical scales you think of other fish. They have fleshy pectoral fins similar to the lobe fin fish, which we will talk about as we move through fish because they are a bit more closely related to tetrapods. As we get further, that'll make more sense. They use some little spiracles on top of their head for breathing, and they also have a set of paired lungs as well as gills. So they kind of took everything and said, I'm going to keep that because I want to.
Yeah, this looks cool. I forgot to put this in the notes. Their right lung is abundantly larger than their left lung.
Okay. So it's sort of like a evolutionary thing. So that right lung is becoming almost like a primitive swim bladder, but it's a lung.
The larger right lung reaches the whole length of the body cavity, while the left lung extends to the stomach.
Okay.
I don't know why one's so much longer.
Probably for that swim bladder function.
thing.
Yeah. And they're typically nocturnal hunters that feed on small vertebrates, crustaceans, insects. So as you can see, they're not very large fish. They are what is called a facultative air breather. So when water quality is really poor and there's not a lot of oxygen, they are actually able to breathe air. And they're
Hence the
very
lungs.
Yes, thanks to those lungs that they still have. And they're quite popular in hobby aquariums, commonly known as dragon fins.
Yeah, they're really cool looking. They got like we kind of talked about. They have the what are they called? The dorsal finlets that
Yes.
Alex talked about.
Yeah, so they have a bunch of small dorsal fins, basically.
Yeah,
as
you
can
can kind of
see
see
in
in
the
the
image
image that
there.
I've pulled up. It's kind of like a stegosaurus spine, but on a fish.
Okay. And that will lead us into our big group for today, Chondrostia.
Yeah, chondrosti. I'll talk about chondrosti for a little bit here if Alex
Okay,
wants
yeah.
to
You let me pull up a picture there. Thank you.
pull up the image. Originally, this word, chondrosti, was used to describe all of the Neopterygians fish, which is literally everything else. besides what we're talking about today. This would have included the beachers, the birchers originally, but now it's really just describing the subclass that we know today as the sturgeons and the paddlefish, as well as all their extinct little relative buddies.
Yeah. So
they've
I'll share
perfect.
first. Allow me to zoom in. This is just our body plans. I'll pull up a better picture once as we work through this. But these are your paddlefish and your sturgeon, and then at the bottom you can see the bircher there. They're kind of all somewhat similar. They have those more plate-like scales.
Well, actually, sturgeons and paddlefish are scaleless.
Well, then yeah, egg on my face. I
But
sit corrected.
yes, you sit corrected. But I'll talk about it in a little bit on what sturgeons have instead of scales.
Okay.
So all living species kind of fall under the chondrostae, fall under the orders of Acipenseriforms, which are your sturgeon, or your Polyodontidae, which are your paddlefish. So we'll start with sturgeon, Acipenseridae. There's 28 extant species and 8 extinct species, which typically you flip-flop those numbers, and there's more extinct species than living species just because there's much more time to have extinct species.
But sturgeon are basically dinosaurs.
Sturgeon are very much dinosaurs. Hence why we're talking about them today as we talk about primitive fish species. The oldest fossils of actual sturgeons date back to the late Cretaceous. This family is grouped into four genera. Acespenser, Puso, Scarferensis, and Pseudoscarferensis. The Acespenser is kind of like the catch-all group, and the other three groups are like localized. So the Husos are like from Europe and Russia. Scarferensis is the North American sturgeon, and Pseudoscarferensis is like the Central Asian, like from your like Stan country, like your Eastern Bloc standing countries, and things like that. Two species have been declared extinct in the wild. The Dabry sturgeon, which is also known as like the Yangtze sturgeon, that was found in China in the Yangtze River, which, in case you didn't know, is kind of like a cesspool of pollution.
Yeah, it's not great.
A lot of things that are native to only that river system are either
gone extinct or in
either
rough
extinct
shape
or critically endangered.
Isn't that the one? Isn't the Three Gorges Dam on the Yangtze, or is that on the Yellow River?
You got good.
I'm getting there.
But the other species is the Adriatic sturgeon, and I will talk about that.
It is on the Yangtze River.
Right.
So
perfect.
Not great.
Not great.
Not helping, I should say.
And the other species is the Adriatic sturgeon, which was native to like the Adriatic Sea, which has been drained, I believe.
It's definitely. I believe it is. I don't know if it's
been reduced,
but it's been significantly shrunk due to droughts and things like.
The Cyrdaria shovel-nosed sturgeon is believed to be extinct altogether. We have not seen one since the 1960s, which is 60 years ago. It's a long time to not see a species. Granted, this is a fish, and they live in water, and water is not exactly the easiest to just kind of like do surveys of. They're long-living individuals, oftentimes reaching upwards of 100 years in age. And they typically don't reach their like sexual maturity, like adulthood stage. There we go. There's a sturgeon. What is this? The Atlantic sturgeon?
I think it might just be the common sturgeon. I believe that's what it is.
Yeah, and they typically don't reach like maturity until like their 20s. They have elongated, smooth, scaleless bodies, armored with 5 rows of bony plates called scutes. And we'll talk about scutes when we talk about reptiles.
Yes, we'll talk about them a lot.
because reptiles also have scales, and sometimes they have scutes. But the scutes are kind of like dermal plates that aren't quite scales, like a primitive form of a scale.
Yeah.
The largest sturgeon ever recorded was a species known as the beluga. Scientific name, I believe it's huso, and it weighed in at a whopping 3,000 pounds, actually more than 3,000 pounds, and was 23 and a half feet long, which is
That's like
gigundous.
Yeah, that's what, like 1,500 kilograms roughly. And then
Yeah, 1,500 kilograms.
and however many meters that is.
We're talking over a ton.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Over almost 2 tons. 1.5.
Yeah, we're talking about a ton and a half, 23 feet. It's pretty big. That's like
That's like twice
the
the size
size
of the
of
room
Alex.
I'm in, yeah.
Yeah,
And that's like the size of a bus almost.
and that's a fish.
Yeah.
Not only is that a fish, it's a freshwater fish.
Yeah. Hefty.
Hefty.
Big old guy.
Most sturgeon species are bottom feeders and are migratory. There's a special word for migratory that I don't remember the name of. It starts with an A.
It also.
It escapes me.
It does escape me.
Leave it in the comments below because we forget.
We're struggling.
And they move upstream, so they typically live in like the estuary, river delta areas, and they'll move upstream to spawn and lay their eggs. Speaking of eggs, many of these sturgeon species are highly endangered, oftentimes critically endangered, because they're harvested for their roe. Roe
Which
is
is-
used to make caviar.
Yes.
Caviar is oftentimes a status symbol of incredulous wealth.
Yes, and sturgeon caviar is, I believe, one of
Like
the
top of the line.
upper levels. It's very expensive.
And the sturgeon range kind of ranges from the northern hemisphere, from like the subtropics to the subarctic, which is quite a big chunk. That's pretty much like anything not named Central America and Northern Africa.
Yeah, I mean it's a pretty wide area, pretty large area. That's most of the northern hemisphere pretty much. That's
Yeah.
not frozen or like we said the tropics.
Yeah, they range
Yeah.
through most freshwater systems on both sides of the U.S. In the Pacific area, most rivers in California, all the way up to British Columbia. You're talking Great Lakes, Mississippi River system.
The Great Lakes is a very big breeding ground for sturgeon.
And then on the opposite side of the pond in Europe, all along the Atlantic coast, dipping into the Mediterranean and Adriatic basins, as well as like your rivers that flow into the Arctic in Russia, and things that like your freshwater systems in like the southeastern part of Europe that kind of like flow into that Mediterranean, as well as some freshwater systems in like Central Bloc, Stany countries, like in that Eurasian area. And as I said, like the Yangtze one, which is possible, the Yangtze species, which is extinct in the wild, obviously in Chinese river systems. So similarly to chondrichthyes, sturgeons do not have a bony skeleton. They are also a cartilaginous skeleton, and they kind of retain that notochord through their post-embryonic stages. So a lot of times, in most vertebrate species, including us as humans, we have a notochord as an embryo. When you're a little tiny embryo in the womb, you have this notochord. And as you grow and develop into a baby, you trade in that notochord for an actual vertebrate spine, bony spine. Not these guys. They keep that notochord. It's kind of like their only like structure to keep their body shape, and it's relatively squishy.
But The cool kind of funky thing about this is actually a derived characteristic. So they've almost re-evolved the
Yeah,
cartilaginous skeleton.
they had it at first, and then developed the bony, uh, what is it, osteoized, whatever the tech,
Yeah,
osteoized skeleton, and said
ossified. Is that what you're trying?
ossified. That's the word. And said, actually, we don't like that. Let's go back.
Yeah. That's why the sturgeon are typically considered the closest fish relatives to sharks as far as the bony fishes are concerned.
Yeah, which
For this reason.
it's so confusing. Why would you go back?
I don't know.
Obviously, it worked. So
Yeah,
not
I
gonna
mean,
question it.
yeah.
As you can see in this image that Alex pulled up, sturgeon possessed barbels. Barbels are, you can see, typically seen in catfish and things of that nature. The whiskers per se on a sturgeon, it's more of a beard than whiskers. The electroreceptive organs that they kind of like scrape along the bottom. They don't really have great eyesight, so they'll scrape along the bottom, and then they don't have teeth either, so they just kind of like suck up whatever, and eat it. So really, if it fits in the mouth, it's going in their stomach.
Pretty much.
They also exhibit polyploidy. So
This is pretty cool. Yeah.
you as a human, are a diploid, which means you have 2 chromosomes in a pair. And sturgeons, you can have 4 chromosomes in a pair,
Or more.
up to 16 chromosomes in a pair.
Jeez.
Which, in meiosis, I don't even want to see what that crossover looks like.
No. I'm good.
Do you just go through multiple? What do? Do you go through multiple stages, or did you just have 8 to cross over at the same time?
They just do whatever they want, is what it is, honestly.
Ooh, I don't even want to see that.
Like,
I mean,
pairs stay together, and then they pair with another pair. You get 4, and then both of those pairs stay together.
this sounds
And
confusing.
yeah, it's crazy.
That's our sturgeon for the day. We'll move on into our next group, which is going to be Polyodontidae, which are the paddlefish. Alex,
Yes,
would you like to
sir.
cover it, or do you want me to just keep rambling here?
I can cover. I was just trying to find a picture real quick, so that way it's up before I start talking.
They look funny.
This image is way zoomed in. Hold on. There we go. Share this tab. Bingo.
Yeah, there's your paddlefish.
There's my paddlefish. So of course, they're called paddlefish due to that extended rostrum at the front of the face there, which they believe is used to enhance the electroreceptive capabilities of the fish.
They have the same electroreceptors as shark. The ampullae of
Lorenzini.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I got the first word right this
Yes,
time.
yeah, we remembered it finally after having to look it up like 3 times. There are 8 species in total, 7 of which are extinct and 1 extant species. There was another one that was still living. It was the Chinese paddlefish, but it was declared extinct in 2022 following research and a recommendation from 2019. The earliest fossils of paddlefish date back to the early Cretaceous period in China, dating about 120 million years ago. Of course, overfishing, pollution, and encroachment from human populations drastically reduced their range, and a lot of alteration of the river systems blocked off ancestral spawning grounds, which is what has led to their significant decline. They do possess a similar skeletal structure to sturgeon, lacking that bony skeleton. And that rostrum on the front, that kind of the big nose, does form shortly after hatching and is much narrower and more sword-like was much narrower and more sword-like in the Chinese paddlefish compared to the American paddlefish. So I would say the one on the screen here, which is as we said, that only living species, is the American paddlefish. And they are typically suspension filter feeders, which means that as they kind of swim, they just hold their mouth open and gather up what floats into their mouths. So they feed primarily on zooplankton and, on occasion, small insects and fish.
Hey, you'll never guess where the Chinese paddlefish was found.
I'm going to guess it's the Yangtze River.
Yeah, that was.
That'll do it.
You people and your textile pollution and
Gigantic.
dams that aren't.
But the American paddlefish is native to the Mississippi River Basin. So just to give you an idea of
It
where
used to
they
have
are.
quite the range. It
I'm
used to
sure
be
it
all the
did.
way up to the Great Lakes.
I'm sure it did. I'm surprised they haven't tried to reintroduce it further north.
I feel like the lamprey would get to them quicker.
Yeah, but they have been working on efforts to kind of bring them back a little bit. There are hatcheries throughout the Mississippi River Basin that they're trying to help reintroduce them.
You know, I feel like the Asian carp also doesn't help their case.
No, it does not.
There's a lot of problems here.
Yeah, and actually, I will say though, it looks like from what I'm reading here, it was with the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service and its former counterpart within the Soviet Union back in the 1970s. So it was still the Soviet Union. Kind of did this breeding program. The American paddlefish were imported to the USSR for aquaculture. So they actually now have that kind of did spread to other parts of Europe. So they have now found some in like the Danube River. They found some specimens back, like they were caught by fishermen in the early mid 2000s, and then as well they were introduced into China, and they do have some. I think that they may be trying to have them take the place of the now extinct Chinese paddlefish. Yeah, sorry, I had a brain fart.
Do you think that'll cause problems in the future?
I don't know, because they are such slow growing and kind of just filter feeding species. And I will say some of the paddlefish are actually being polycultured within carp ponds, so they may not be affected by the Asian carp quite as much. Like they're grown in the same ponds. Yeah.
That's all that means?
Yeah, and they're sold to restaurants for food, and then some are cultured for caviar production.
I feel like there's two ways to be like a heavily focused creature for red list conservation efforts. You either have to look incredibly dumb and silly, i.e. the paddlefish,
Yeah.
or you have to be such an outstanding food product that it's just necessary for conservation.
Yeah. That, or you're just so popular, even though you're
big.
Yeah, that they want to save you, like the panda. Panda doesn't really do a whole lot, and they're
Falls
kind of
off trees.
They're kind of stupid, but everyone loves pandas, so we're trying to save pandas. But that is all I've got, so I think that will wrap up our lesson for today. A little bit of a shorter lesson. We're breaking up the fish into smaller chunks because we're going to be here for a while.
Yeah, there's also more information per group to cover.
Yes, these are a lot more. They're much more heavily researched.
Yeah.
More recently researched also. So.
And they're also more, I don't want to say diverse, because a lot of the invertebrates groups we covered were very diverse within themselves.
Yes.
But it wasn't like outstandingly different that said that we had to break it down as heavily.
Okay.
Because like next week when we talk about gars and bowfins, those are two completely unique things that are also very much different from every other fish we're going to talk about.
Yeah, they kind of do their own thing.
But have no fear, because that's still not the end of the episode. We have our usual bits here. Well, at least two of them. I didn't quite find my From the Vault today. I kind of did a little power hour of research before we started, and just did not have the time to find my From the Vault today. But it's okay, because I'll kick us off with today's amazing species. We're going to talk about the Adriatic sturgeon, as I kind of alluded to earlier. Here we go. High quality image there from
On the money.
The man, Alex. If you could would you please scroll down to the map?
I can do that. Hold on, here we go. See if I can. That's right. You can see it.
The IUCN Red List has these listed as critically endangered,
There we go. Sorry.
which that's pretty good. How did you do that, fancy pants?
The fancy button in the corner that's like the box, the full screen button.
That'll do it. But so these were described as extinct in the wild, but it appears that they have been reintroduced into the wild. There was a lot of conservation efforts through a lot of museums and aquariums throughout Europe to kind of reintroduce them. As you can see, the red areas are extinct regions, so off the coast of Albania, and then the northern coast of Italy, between Italy and Croatia. I believe that's still Italy, right?
Yeah. Here in the center,
Yeah.
that is Italy.
Okay, perfect. So those red areas there are extinct regions. I'm not quite seeing. Oh, I guess there's a little bit of a possibly extinct region in Albania,
Yeah.
further up, more into like a mountainous river system. But the real focus is on the extant region in Italy, up in the river systems in northern Italy, where we kind of reintroduced this species. We're now working on getting population up, as you can see. Where you can back out of the map now, if you would. You see that little green arrow that says we are increasing. We're at upwards of 100 individuals now. Obviously, this was back in 2019 when this was assessed, so we might be up to probably, knowing Sturgeons, like 105. But
Yeah.
all progress is good progress. We're increasing. That's the important part. Who cares how slow it is?
Yeah.
It is restricted to the Po River drainage, and the rivers Adige, Lavenza, Piave, and Tagliamento in Italy. That's where we introduced it to. I'm sure as we expand this and population become more stable, we will work its way back to its original resident habitat.
Let's hope so.
I would also hope so. Area of occupancy is about 26,000 square kilometers. 2,600, my bad. I lied. 2,600. Added a zero. Your generation length for these is about 45 years, which is a decent chunk of time.
Yeah, that's a fairly long generation.
Yeah. Your typical threats: overharvesting, dams and water management, pollution from wastewater, industrial effluent, agricultural, like so fertilizer runoff, so recreational activities, so boating activities, and things like that, as well as invasive species. So maybe I can get some of those in detail. What is this species? Silurus glanus, which is the Welsh catfish. Yeah.
Yeah, that'll do it.
That'll outcompete you in a heartbeat.
Absolutely.
Especially as a large benthic predator.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's fun. That's real fun. We do have in place conservation. So
Of course.
we have well, yeah, of course, if we have an increasing populations, we have to be doing something about it because these things just don't naturally happen. We have action recovery plans, monitoring schemes, XC2 conservation, which means we take it out of its habitat and stick it somewhere else so we can conserve it. Kind of like how we did with these aquariums, taking them, having not domesticated populations, but out of habitat populations that were eventually reintroduced. And there are definite conservation sites throughout the range, and they occur in a couple protected areas, as well as education benefits to in the local areas about conservation. That's my general overview. If you'd like to know more, let me know in an email, a comment, or whatever you have. I'll flip it back over to Alex so he can talk about our most wanted of the day.
Do that. So my most wanted today is the round goby. So it is the round goby. Trying to find my information here. Here we go. We got some fact sheets. So they trying to find where they are native to, and I'm struggling. Okay, native to the Black and Caspian Sea of Eastern Europe, introduced to North America 1990, probably brought over in the ballast water of ships from Europe, and it has successfully spread to all of the Great Lakes and is beginning to invade inland waters. They've reached depths or densities of over 100 fish per square meter, so there's a lot of them. They really like rocky, sandy bottoms. They feed very aggressively on insects and other small organisms that they are kind of around the lakes and those river edges where they feed into the Great Lakes. They do eat a large quantity of like zebra and quagga mussels, so they're kind of doing us a favor eating some invasive species.
That
But
kind of sucks.
yeah, but they also eat small fish and fish eggs, and their aggressive eating habits and ability to spawn very, very often throughout each season is why they have spread so quickly. And of course, they outcompete native bottom-dwelling fish such as the mottled sculpin and log perch. They threaten a number of at-risk species within the Great Lakes Basin, such as the northern mad tom and the eastern and they've actually by eating eggs and fry, they have actually reduced populations of sport fish as well.
Yeah,
So
they feed on trout and bass eggs whenever we talk about feeding on eggs.
yes, and is believed that the round goby can be linked to outbreaks of botulism in the Great Lakes, which has caused large die-offs of birds and the larger fish as it bioaccumulates. But they're about 6 to 16 centimeters long, so not super large, but about half a foot. They're very, very cylindrical, have a round, kind of blunt snout, nose area. Unfortunately, it does look similar to some native species, such as the sculpin, but there's also the invasive tube-nosed goby, it looks like as well. So it can be hard to tell sometimes if they are similar or different. The sculpin have more of a frog-like face. Their eyes are a bit more forward and not quite, their face isn't quite so rounded, kind of have a wider mouth, and their coloration is a bit different. But that is my invasive species for this week. As always, it is one that is kind of causing problems in some pretty important fisheries within, especially North America.
Yeah, we as a group tend to focus on North American invasives,
But
just because that's our area.
Yes, yeah, we are both from the United States, so it is what we are most familiar with. Try to find some from other areas, but at least for us here, it's harder for us to find some of that because
Yeah.
of the way the internet works. But that will lead us to our final thing for
we
this
don't have
evening,
a
and
we don't
that
have a from
is
the vault.
you don't have a from the vault for tonight.
No, I didn't get the time. Also, the
sturgeon themselves kind of are the vault.
Yeah, there's a severe lack of extinct sturgeon.
Yeah, that is true. We did say that.
So that's gonna wrap up our episode. We're about on pace. It feels like we're done a little bit earlier than we typically are, but
No, we're really
We're
not.
on
It just I
pace.
think we just kind of everything we timed it out very well this week.
Yeah. So, as always, follow us on Spotify at Life the Complete Story. That's probably where you're listening to us right now. But if
Most
you're not,
likely, probably on YouTube if you're not.
give us a follow. If you're on YouTube or if you're on Spotify, go to the YouTube page, subscribe to the page, like the videos, leave a comment, say, we need more of Alex. We need more Most Wanted. Whatever we need more of, whatever you want us to do, we will probably do it. If you want us to highlight the sturgeons in depth and be like, really talk about the genus, like talk about this genera. Okay, sure thing. We'll do a little bit or whatever. Follow us on Facebook at Life the Complete Story. Like us on Instagram at Life Complete Story. Lots of cool. Oh, we didn't have any clips go up last week. I apologize. I talked to John about it. We were having issues with our software that we use to generate the clips. We
It
could
was
not
also a
get.
holiday last week in the
It was
United
also
States,
Thanksgiving.
so
Yeah, we struggle a little bit there. The software's down for a little bit. We're hoping it's back up this week so we can get some clips out. So, and make sure you follow us on TikTok at Life Complete Story.
yes, sir.
We like your interaction. We like your feedback. We like your support. So make sure you're following us on all our socials so you can stay up to date with anything and everything going on.
Absolutely, and eventually we'd like to get kind of audience segments that we can cover if there's something that you really want to hear about.
Yeah, feature you guys. Maybe you really know your stuff about a certain thing. You're like, hey, throw me on. Like, okay, we'll try.
Yeah,
If you're a
absolutely.
genius on a certain thing, all you. Like, trust me, you wait till we get to sloths and I will be.
Be
Oh,
all over the slot.
Alex will not talk that episode.
Probably not much. Just let you run.
But yeah, we're having a blast talking to you guys, sharing our knowledge, and as we say every episode, learn
Keep
something
learning.
new.
Keep learning.
And
See
we
you
will
all
catch you guys
next week.